Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm seeing in the chat you all sharing where you're from. Please continue to do that. We love to see where everyone's joining us from all over the world on this beautiful Tuesday. I am Meg Newhouse. I am the CEO and co-founder of Inspirant Group. Inspirant is the home of the Unconsultants, and we help guide you on your journey from inspiration to transformation. I could not be more excited about this morning. And I have to tell you all, I don't usually get nervous about these things, but I'm going to be honest with you this morning. I'm a little nervous just because I could not be more inspired by the conversation that we've been having with this group, just as the preparation has been having. So I think we have two of the most important topics that companies are grappling with right now, right? Focusing on DEI and focusing on remote work. And we've brought you the intersection of that this morning with these experts that you get to learn from today. I would encourage you to keep an open mind as part of our conversation. So in the prep, we decided that we didn't want to stay traditional about this. We kind of want to get a little bit out of the box, maybe get a little bit uncomfortable today, but I encourage you to think about how that applies not only to you personally, but also to your organization. And just be with us today with an air of curiosity and what can you learn from all this. And I have to tell you, not only do we have expert thought leaders who can help share the theories and the best practices, but also we are so fortunate that they're also practitioners. They've lived it, they've been there, they've done that. And so they can give us those lessons learned and what they've seen through their years of expertise. So thank you again for being with us. We are recording the session, so just keep that in mind. Oh, hey, Suzette. We're getting some highs from some friends. That's great. We're so glad you're here. So without further ado, I'd like to take a moment to introduce our expert panel this morning. I'm going to start with Cynthia Rodriguez. Cynthia, can you please take yourself off mute, introduce yourself?
Hello, all. My name is Cynthia Rodriguez, and I am Director of Client Services for Employee Experience for Holistic outside of Chicago. So my background is in HR, particularly employee relations, org and leadership development, and focusing on the overall employee experience. I worked in a number of different industries, and for me, it's all about the employee. So I'm going to take the time today to focus on from that lens, and hope you all get something from that. So happy to be here.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. Sybil, how about you? Let's hear your story.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Sybil Stewart. I am the Director of Diversity and Employee Success at eXp Realty. We are a global remote, 100% remote real estate company. And so this is what we talk about every day, of incorporating diversity into our remote platform. And I am so excited to join these ladies here this morning, and all of you as well.
Thank you so much, Sybil. We're so happy to have you. Yvonne, let's hear from you.
Wow, what a privilege to be amongst this incredible panel. So I'm Yvonne Wolf, based in Boston currently. I'm a 3-time CHRO and 4-time head of leadership practices and OD practices for really big branded organizations, Marriott, Pepsi, GSK, Novartis. Most recently, I was the head of HR for the Gates Medical Research Institute. And right now, I'm absolutely thrilled to be focused on coaching and consulting and board work because I'm my purpose and my passion. And it also gives me a chance to spend time with you. So I'm looking forward to this conversation and from learning from each of you.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. You guys see, I wasn't joking. We got the experts here with us today. So let's kick it off, right? If we're going to have this real, honest, open conversation about the topic that we brought everyone here to have this morning, Yvonne, let's start with you. How do we even begin to have organizations and the people that make them up prioritize a culture of DEI?
Yeah, I'm a root cause girl. So thank you for asking that question, Meg. There are a lot of webinars these wonderful folks could join. There's 110 people so far. So what's exciting is hopefully you'll take away some very practical ideas and solutions. For me, I think, again, let's look at the root cause. I think it's exciting that we are talking about DEI right now. But what I think we also have to be really honest with is if we don't have diverse pipelines of talent, if people are feeling some level of lack of respect or lack of trust or whatever the conditions might be within the organization, we have to look at how did we get there? You know, what are the decisions that we made? And so HR and executive teams, I think this is really actually a wake-up call for us. This isn't about the folks on the front line and they need to work better, closer together. It's about some of the decisions that we've been making that are producing the outcomes.
So Cynthia, I mean, where can we even start with the, looking at these systems and thinking about the people that are involved with them and getting people to start to take action? What have you been seeing?
Yeah, when we first started this this conversation, we were talking about, and it's really important to consider change management in all this. It's building in the structure, building in sort of actual next steps and an actual platform from which to sort of catapult this discussion. We need to have change management things in place. And, that really starts with the people. It starts with seeking first to understand. It starts with education. It starts with communication. So, when you think about building in a culture of diversity within, it's a change, right? I mean, we say we like to be diverse, we want to, do all the things and, sort of start all these traditions and, bring in I don't know, like just do all the things. But if we haven't really thought about it, we haven't really been intentional about it. And it starts with the people. We really need to start the conversation with getting to know our people, understanding ourselves, and really kind of diving in from there, because it's a human thing. It's a human problem. We're human resources, right? What a novel concept.
I agree with Cynthia. And I think, that other component of change management, and I know Yvonne will echo this as well, is having that layer of board engagement as well. It's one thing to change the demographic and diversity of your staff, but, true emphasis on that board development as well has got to be a key strategic decision for the organization to see that type of movement and success that they are wanting to see in this area.
Yeah, thank you for teeing that up, Sybil. Because if the board does start asking questions, beyond, in compensation committees, often boards are focused on, how much are we going to pay the CEO? And, but if the boards would take it a step deeper and ask about the leadership team, what are their employee engagement scores? Cynthia can speak to this quite well. What is the data saying about how they show up and how they lead? And so I would even, add another practical solution is get your leaders to spend some time reflecting on themselves. So before you kind of run out and do the, unconscious bias training or go hire more, people, diverse talent, get the leader to have a really honest conversation about their biases. What are their values about people? Because I heard an incredible quote the other day, what good is it to have a seat if the seat has spikes? So if your culture is hostile to the talent that you're bringing in, if the leader isn't focused on really engaging people and making sure they feel valued and respected, guess what? It's actually going to even be worse in a remote environment. Because, despite the fact that we're talking about, the Zoom and team environment kind of gives us all the same real estate, it also leaves us unchecking our biases because we're operating in stress. We're working. I call it living at work. We're not working from home. We're living at work. We got too much work to get done. We've got homeschooling. Some of us have financial issues to contend with. We've got illnesses. We've got, and unfortunately, in some cases, death. So can you imagine showing up, at work with somebody who's different? Your stress level isn't going to put you in the best position to embrace them. So getting leaders to really, really think about who they are as individuals and how they're showing up and what their values are, before you even launch one thing, and that'll get that sort of leadership commitment. And then back to Sybil's point, have that board asking those hard questions about what are they doing, and how do we know that the organization has a long-term value and is performing well.
So I'm just going to go there and, talk to our leaders. Let's talk, y'all. So, I've had so many people tell me that, we don't have a problem. I don't have any biases. We all have them. We all have them. And it's not about getting rid of them. It's about managing them, right? And I invite our leaders, our HR folks, our board members to, when Yvonne says, take a look at ourselves, really, really open your mind and open your heart to the possibility that you may not have all the answers, that you may not be doing everything right. And doing everything right, I don't know, that's subjective, but really think about how you could be playing into the story, how your thoughts and biases and all the things that, sort of take us through this life, how you might be contributing to the overall challenges, right? I mean, getting to know ourselves and understanding our humanness in all this is beautiful. And we don't get it all right. But if we show up and, just really admit, where we're contributing to our own negative story, seek first to understand ourselves and then others, I think we're going to be getting somewhere. We're going to make some movement. And we're starting to see that. We're starting to see it.
Absolutely. And I just want to chime in just 1 second there to also say, right, we in HR are equally or could be equally as guilty. I know we talked about that earlier as well, of creating these uncomfortable situations. And so we as practitioners and organizational leaders have to invite the conversation, and we have to be prepared to lead the charge through those uncomfortable conversations. And one of the things that I recommend across the board to my company and my staff is have that accountability partner. Like I have one, I get it wrong sometime, and I can acknowledge that openly. When I run our diversity trainings, I tell people, hold me accountable, challenge me on every single thing I say, send me a message, open up your mic, let me make sure that I am checking myself at the door, because we all have biases, and I need that accountability as well to make sure I am delivering the best message every single time that we share and engage in these types of conversations.
Wow.
Oh, sorry, Yvonne. I just love that. Just the idea of leading from the top, right? The idea of seeking first to understand how important that is for our audience here today to hear that, because I think we have a bunch of leaders, we have a bunch of folks from HR here as well. If you are not living what you are saying, people can tell, can't they? People know when you're not being genuine. We have a question from the audience here that's getting upvoted. So Michael, thank you so much. Any tips for leaders and executives to continue to cultivate self-awareness, particularly those with privileged identities?
Yeah, I'm glad you called that one out, Meg. I was looking at Michael's question. Kudos to you on that one. Hey, it starts with what you just did. It starts with this whole notion of asking questions. I wrote in an article in Inc. recently, behavior that's critical this year in this time of recovering and healing is noticing. So if leaders actually take the time to get to know their folks, spend time, you can build it in literally weekly check-ins, and don't just start with the work, start with what's happening in your world. Because what happens is that sort of empathy and that connectedness starts to happen. And when that humanity grows, we actually start to see some of our privilege and create a better connection to others. Another really nice strategy that I've seen is reverse diverse mentoring. So a person who's in, a powerful privileged role, who's of one, identity, spending time with somebody who is in a less privileged position. It could be by level, it could be by, in terms of their their identity or whatever the case, but where there is difference and each of them are expected to learn from each other. I did one of those, and I was the senior leader, and the person that I selected to actually be a reverse mentor with was an Asian male who was in much more junior. And I can't tell you, we saw the world differently often, but we also learned a lot from each other, and our ideas actually improved. He turns out I've ever had, so I could vet ideas past him, and then I helped him think about how he could position himself differently in the organization to succeed. So that's I don't know, Michael, if that idea, and if others have other ideas, but glad you brought that up. Oh, and also I should say, do your work on, you have the implicit assumption test that you can take through Harvard. There's plenty of free stuff. But I love what Sybil talked about too, is, lean into your HR partner to say, hey, how could I be better at this? And in HR, use this as an opportunity. I love what you said, Sybil, be courageous. So much about what's happening in the organizations has happened on our watch. We haven't challenged leaders. We haven't looked at systems to look at inequities and brought those up. They may not be popular conversations, but they're important conversations to have.
Absolutely. I have an HR mentor, and she told me this right when I first got into HR. She said, either you are going to be your company's greatest asset or your company's liability. And we have to choose every day to be an asset.
I have a mentor who, so the best advice I've ever received was to stop talking so much. So as a leader or as a human, listening is it's so understated, it's so undervalued, but truly listening and taking what we're hearing to heart to look at ourselves more deeply. What's really oozing out of me, what's coming out of my heart, what do people, how do people perceive me? And not that you can change that, but you do need to manage that perception, and understanding our teams, and just listening to them. And when I say seek first to understand, it helps to build, well, first of all, curiosity, asking good questions, and building empathy, because really understanding people is to understand their stories. And you're not going to really understand necessarily their experiences, but it really helps us to be empathetic towards them and getting to know them, because it's really hard to hate somebody that their story, isn't it? Like you're just all in, it just opens your heart, and it really invites trust, and relationship deepening. And I think a lot of this is based in trust, really getting to know our teams and understanding ourselves. It's building trust, and we can go from there.
Cynthia, that's a great point. Trust is the foundation. Can I take Sherwin Moore's question that looks like it's got 5? Is it true that group reflects its leader when things go wrong? Who gets the blame, the CEO or HR, and why? First of all, I'm curious what Sherwin thinks, and I think Sherwin has an insight in that question. But they say that old adage, the fish stinks from the top, or the point is leaders set the tone, and HR practices enable the culture. So I would say the chief people officer, the chief diversity officer, and the CEO are one human being, and they are aligned in their work and in their journey, and it's part of the strategy. And if it's not happening, it's best to start there. What's everybody else think?
I definitely agree. And again, I go back to, we were hired, right, to set the tone, to give the expectation. And I think we're in that very unique position of being able to have those harder conversations with our senior leaders. And if we've built trust with them, then they will see us as the resource that we were hired to be. It should not be two, opposing ends. You should have been brought into that culture with the expectation that you were going to be the person challenging it, pushing it forward, and setting new policies to help develop the culture that the organization wants to be. So there should be, even if you can disagree about everything, there should be some line of congruency around how you're going to manage the company, the culture, the employees, and the employee experience.
I think a good way to do that is around the data. At Holistic, we measure the employee experience by really, taking data points and helping, sort of peeling back the layers, helping to understand the demographic information, the employee sentiment, and the company DNA. What does the company think they are? Who do they say they are? Is it true, right? So we take those 3 points and put them together, and I think that's where we can really gain some ground with our leaders, our board members, by really showing the data, because we can say things all day long. We can say what we feel, and we can say what we think people are feeling, but what does the data tell us? And once we look at that, that's when we can really start making recommendations and really start, putting these things into play, because, we really want to be making sure that we're building long-term meaningful solutions versus just making changes.
Can I build on your point, Cynthia? You're right. It is about the data. And I like something else you said earlier, too. It's about the conversation as a result of the data. So, really engaging with folks in that conversation. And Sybil, as you were talking, can I indulge you guys in a story? Because, I'm trying to practice my storytelling. So when I worked for Pepsi, this is that point about HR being courageous. When I worked for Pepsi eons ago, I was following a legendary CHRO, who is now the CHRO for GE, Kevin Cox. And the leader of the HR function was this wonderful guy by the name of Mike Feiner. And Mike Feiner thought he should meet literally every HR person who joined the organization, if you could imagine that. I'm a little rep, I'm following a legend, I'm decked up against this really senior leader. And I'm thinking, okay, great. Let me make sure he likes me, right? So I get in there, and 6 months in, Mike Feiner invites me to his office, and it's one of those humongous offices, and you have to like walk forever until you get there. So I'm totally intimidated. So he sits down and he says, hey, Yvonne, I love what you're doing. Surrender really loves you. You're really gaining his confidence. He's relying on you. It's really, really great. And then he leans in, he says, I just have one question for you. Are you challenging him? Because if all we're getting are his ideas, why do I need you in the room? So by then I'm totally intimidated and about to cry. He leans in one more time and he says, go there and be courageous. I have your back. I will support you publicly. I may challenge you privately. I cannot say I'll love every idea you have when it's just one-on-one, but I believe in you and I believe in your judgment. So go forth and be courageous. What if we all had leaders like that said, hey, I've got you, I trust you, I believe in you, I'm going to coach you, but whatever you do, I will support you as long as you are leading with integrity and doing the right thing.
I mean, that is such a powerful story, Yvonne. Well done. Your storytelling is top notch, my friend. I mean, so we're hearing echoes of leadership really leading from the top. I've heard many times, and I think about this in my own role, that the CEO really is the chief culture officer, aren't they? And really they're setting the tone for the entire organization. But Sybil, I love what you were saying about how HR really needs to support that. But is HR always the one leading these DEI initiatives and conversations? Do they need to be? Should they be? How do we get other people involved? Oh, Cynthia.
Well, it's everyone's responsibility. It is every single person's responsibility. And it's different for every person. We all have a different background. We all have different experiences, and that changes what we have to bring to the table. But every person in the organization, in life, has some ownership, or should take some ownership of these things, and really making sure that things are fair and equitable, and particularly in this current environment. We're working remote. We don't have access to people in the ways that we did before. So how can we contribute to that? And, we can sit around all day and blame other people and play victim. That's and say, right. Oh, well, my manager should be doing this, or HR should, coulda, woulda. stop it. Like, take some ownership and do something, something very small. Ask a question, have a conversation with someone, get to know someone, push back. Who was saying, I think it was Sybil, really hold me accountable, push back and ask those hard questions to see, what can I be doing differently, and challenge our leaders and challenge our HR folks to take ownership as well. But
Agree.
it's all over the world.
I said, it's not everyone's job to be an expert, but it's everyone's job to participate. And I think if we shift our mindset to I will participate, let the experts do the work. We will carry you forward. We'll show you where to do the things. Just show up. And I think that is the key component of taking that proactive stance. I'm going to show up in this way every day. I can't ask for anything else, right? You're choosing to participate. And then the other thing that I think is really important is if we think about how much time we've spent developing and honing our skills in our career, it takes equally as long to develop and hone your skills in this diversity era. So you're not going to get it right the first time around. Allow yourself some grace if you mess up, and extend that courtesy to others when they make a mistake as well. And that's one of the things that I talk about. I said, we're beyond tolerance at this point. I'm quite intolerant when you are not trying to show up and at least pretend to do the right thing. And then you'll start doing it. And then you formed a habit. And now I can engage you in a solid conversation that's beneficial to both of us. And that's the other thing. We all engage and learn differently. If nothing else, I can show you a benefit to having a conversation, then I can start to win you over. And then now you're an advocate, and now you can have that conversation, right? You can now become the champion that I want for you to be.
Yeah, speaking of participation, Greg and Adriana are asking questions about consultants' participations. And to your point, Sybil, about courage, one of my favorite lines, and I'm curious, Sybil, particularly from your experience when you're interacting with consultants, and I've been on both sides, I've been the recipient of consultants and I've been a consultant, but one of my favorite words is, you paid me to tell you the truth. And you have to be willing to walk away, Greg and Adriana, don't you agree? From clients that really don't want to do the work, or it's not something they want to hear, because at the end of the day, you won't be successful unless you're honest with them. So if you're hearing something offensive or you see the client going the wrong way, I mean, it's your duty to be honest in a respectful way, of course. Connecting it to what are they trying to accomplish, and letting them know, you're probably not going to get there if you keep up this. But again, I would always use that language. I would always start when I have to have those provocative conversations that say, hey, Sybil, you paid me to tell you the truth. Can we have an honest conversation here? What do you think?
I agree. And because I've been on both sides as well. And I've also got friends who are now consultants. And one of the hardest things that we talk about, again, supporting each other as HR practitioners is this the client I walk away from? And that is one of the hardest decisions that we make in this industry. Is this the organization I might have to walk away from because it does not align with my values? It does not align with what I thought that they were signing me up for. But to Greg's point, if he feels like this is what they hired him to, like, go forth, be professional, be honest, lean into the numbers like Cynthia suggested, and then also make sure that there is an additional metric. One of the things that I think that we do here at EXP really well is, yes, we measure our recruitment, but then also our retention, right? Because it's one thing to get you in the door, it's another thing to make sure you're happy on the other side of it. So again, engage them at that level that they're comfortable, and then push them a little bit more is what I would say. And then if you find that point is, I can no longer honor myself and do responsibly what this company is asking me to do, then you've got to ask yourself that really tough question. Is this the client for me? Is this the company for me?
And I really think it's thinking about meaningful questions to ask to get to that point, because I think that it's easy. It's not easy, but it's easier to like make assumptions and based on maybe what they're telling us, but I think we need to trust our gut too, in a lot of cases, because sometimes people just don't know what they don't know. And organizations are, at a place where they know they need to do something, right? DEIB, belonging as well, is a thing. It's a reality in our current world, and it's always been a reality, but now it's in everybody's faces, right? But I think that asking the right questions can really help us to understand, again, see first, understand, sort of where the org is. Meet them where they are, and really try to understand what what their end goal is, so that maybe you can help them get there. Because I think we might stop short of, we might fire a client short of just really getting to where we need to be to understand where they are. And I would caution us to not move so quickly. Not saying that y'all are saying to move quickly, but really asking the good questions, the hard questions. Put some time into building out the questions that you want to ask them. And, not just listening to their answer, but how are they responding? What's their body language? What examples are they using? What experiences are they sharing? Things like that really tell you a lot more than just the answer to the question. So
Thank you, Cynthia. I'm hearing an echoing of this conversation might take time. Sybil, I love what you said about, think of all those years you've put into becoming an expert in the work that you're doing. You're going to need to take that kind of time to really, understand this conversation that we're having. And I think for many people, it really is the beginning of this journey, isn't it? And these difficult conversations. And it's really not being afraid, and also being curious, and also giving each other some grace as we start, to really dig in deep to the important, topics that we need to address to be able to move forward together. I saw, gosh, the Q&A is blowing up. Thanks, everybody. There was one, where did you go? Oh, everything's getting voted up here. Michael coming in with the bangers. It's Michael again. Any tips to leaders at small companies with no HR to create an environment where folks feel both safe and empowered to initiate tough conversations? So you don't have that HR partner to go to for this advice. What do you do?
I can speak directly to this. I was at a previous company, an HR department of one. I was their first HR practitioner. But it was actually easier, right? The buy-in was different because it was a smaller community, and that's what going to work felt like. It felt like a family. It felt like we were all in this together. It felt like everyone had, you know, equal vote in how we were going to do things and move our culture. And I just had to educate myself a little bit more. And again, I asked them, I said, well, what do you want to see? How can I help? What things do you want to see happen in your department? What's your bold goal for your company? What's the bold goal for what you want to complete at the end of the year? And then you build backwards, and then it instantly becomes a part of your culture, so that you're not trying to hurry up and draft a policy really fast. It becomes a conversation up at the very beginning, so you're actually in a great position to influence everything at all the levels: how you develop your leaders, how you talk about compensation, how you label your employees. Do you call them staff? Do you call them teams? You have an opportunity to really build that thing from the ground up. So consider yourself lucky. I've done it, and it's a really great exposure to all aspects of what it means to be in HR.
Yeah, I agree with Sybil. In some cases, it can be easier. And I want to take that question a little deeper. And what if there is no HR? And I think to Sybil's point, this is actually a great opportunity to be your own HR, so to speak. So be the leader who is close to the workforce, understands what their needs are. Really simple solutions that I've seen, because I've too worked in small organizations, less than 100 people even, where the leader would bring everybody into the room on a regular basis, and you can especially do that in a Zoom environment. And to Cynthia's point earlier, just listen to them, ask them, what's going on, we're working on this problem as an organization. We're going after these clients, these customers. What ideas do you have? How can I, and what's it like for you? How can I make sure that this is a great place that you want to show up every day? So in that particular case, just be your own HR if you don't even have HR.
One more point to all that is, the leaders of the organization, there's an opportunity, they have an opportunity to really grow and, sort of build their people skills, the soft skills that are necessary for leading people, in a way that HR should be doing it. So um, looking at their own unconscious biases, looking at assess their emotional intelligence, self-awareness, things like that can really help the company, the employees, the staff members, whatever you want to call them, to feel included and like they belong. We talk about inclusion and belonging. What's the difference? Well, inclusion is, in my opinion, an action, something that helps people to feel included, something that you do to do that. And belonging is the sense that you feel when you've been included, right? So it's a feeling on top of the action. So, as a leader, without HR, you can be that HR. And, then that trickles down to all the frontline staff. You're leading yourself, right? Be your own leader. You don't have to have people under you to be a leader. Self-leadership is a thing, and it's something we're all responsible for our own careers. Believe it or not, your manager isn't the one who is going to, make you ultimately successful. You are. So, take that opportunity to really understand, sort of yourself, and that in itself will sort of build an environment where folks can be honest and, again, build that trust, have those difficult conversations. Because when you storm with somebody, you're deepening your roots. When you allow yourself to trust someone enough to tell them the truth, to have a hard conversation, if you don't just cut and run and you stay around, you'll see that your relationship probably deepens.
And I think we've seen that. I think the pandemic has forced us to become a little more human at work, hasn't it? And along those lines, and to echo, Yvonne, what you were saying about bringing everyone in the room and it's easier via Zoom, let's take this conversation about the remote world now. So what has this, disruption? I mean, Sybil, you were saying EXP's been remote, which is amazing. So I want to hear about how maybe this hasn't been such a huge disruption, but how has now moving this conversation into a remote world changed it? Has it been better? Has it been more challenging? What are we seeing?
Yeah, and I'll go really fast because I know we're getting near, but so yeah, we were 100% virtual even before the pandemic. And it created space for us to recruit in ways that companies are just now starting to figure out, right? We never had to pay for a relocation. We didn't have to worry about, does this person live in this time zone or that time zone? So we built in some of the characteristics that companies are now leaning into of, virtual meetings, of virtual coffees, of creating those collaborative spaces. And we do have our own world that we function in as avatars. And we create those moments that companies are now starting to lean into. And because we live in our avatar world, right, like we've eliminated a lot of the diversity challenges that have previously existed because of geography or access to transit, etc. But then you start to uncover new challenges of now we are in a pandemic and we have our ERGs, right? We've got our very specific ERGs, but then our staff started getting creative. We now have a parent support group. We now have the pets of EXP so people can virtually bring their pet to work, right? We've started thinking outside the box of how to engage people as if they were in-house and in office. So I think, it's just fostered this level of additional creativity in leaders in businesses to say, okay, this is our potentially new normal, what are we going to do to create those solutions?
So I think you're going to get a lot of people applying to come and work for your organization. I totally agree with everything you're saying. There's also some really interesting data that's emerging that's saying, wow, this remote work has created opportunities for other, for people to join and maybe live in other places and things like that. It can also exacerbate differences. So I want to talk a little bit about organizations when they don't get it right. So I've spent probably about the six of the last 8 years working remotely. Leading global teams, being part of global teams, or working remotely, even when the piece is in the United States. And if we're not noticing what's happening for people and deliberately trying to bring them in, and that's what I love what you're doing there, Sybil, is creating a space where everybody can feel a sense of belonging, because there's some late data that's suggesting, particularly for your African American or people of color in organ, that the remote work environment is not faring as well for them. And largely because, when you think about it, when you can get together and meet somebody for coffee or run into them in the cafeteria or whatever the case may be, it sort of chips away at some biases, because I think, Cynthia, you talked about this earlier, there's some humanity that's formed. But then, if you're just this figure on a screen, and I don't really know you, um, how am I gaining that sort of familiarity, comfort, and trust so that I see you in your humanity versus seeing you in your differences?
I love what you just said there about being deliberate. And we deliberately have HR office hours twice a week. Our entire team is there, and it's an open door policy. Anybody could come in and walk in. Because there's also this pending fear of, if I go to HR, right? Like, we've almost dissolved that a little bit, because people really do linger and come in and out of virtual space. And I would say, right, it's also on us to even be proactive. Um, to say, maybe I reach out to 5 employees every week just to say hello. And that's my opportunity to create a water cooler moment with them. And then that's also the same thing I've encouraged our leaders to do. I'm like, when's the last time you just said hi to Meg? Or maybe it's not Meg, maybe it's somebody not on your team who's CC'd on something. Hey, Cynthia, how are you? Would love to virtual coffee with you. Would love to virtual Zoom with you. Um, Again, right? Like, I think there are easy ways to resolve what we are calling, that newness.
That's so important, Sybil, and I think it really touches on a really um, a point that's been surfacing a lot in the remote world, and that's mental health, and how we are all affected to some degree um, by what's going on in our world, whether it be the racial injustices, whether it be COVID, all the things. It's a thing. We survey our clients as part of a regular sort of process within our engagement with them, and surveying their employees. We're seeing a drastic increase in folks having concerns about mental health, and whether their organizations are equipped to manage it, to provide the resources that are needed. And I think it goes a long way to doing what Sybil and Yvonne are saying, talk to your people, get to know them, have the conversations, open the door. Yes, it's difficult. We're in Zoom all day, but do something different, like just ask, how are you? What's going on? And we're not trying to get in your business and, understand everything, but I think that people are more willing to share. And if they can share, then we can help them, but provide resources. But mental health is a real thing that's affecting folks, and we've got to find some ways to address it, because it's serious. It's really, really serious. And I think it's a more serious in this remote world than it has been, I think, personally, because we just don't have that human sort of touch. But try to touch someone through the screen. Let's try to do that by the questions we ask, by the conversations we have. You talk about ERGs and really pulling together groups of people that identify, have some things in common. That's really helpful. And it's super helpful, even if you don't have those things in common, to try to understand, to try to get to know someone, and build sort of inroads to folks, and really humanize all of this.
Cynthia, can I build off of your point with a couple of sort of practical ideas that I've seen done? One, to your point about getting to know people, starting team interactions, especially in the Zoom Teams environment, with some real team building in the way where people really get to know each other. I've seen some really great tools. One's called We Connect, another's called, Behind the Curtain, but give people permission to share with the team early on. They can use clip art, visual, storytelling, whatever their level of comfort is, how they process information cognitively, how they recharge. And leaders should absolutely know that, by the way. If you know that you've got team members that are sort of, waning by 2:00, let's not have the big strategy conversation at 3:00, because they've been on Zoom all day. So that kind of noticing and paying attention to the dynamics of the team. And again, in the spirit of noticing, another really cool tool that an organization where I worked, and it was global, we assigned, how you always have the scribe and the timekeeper and all that. Well, we had an observer. And at the end of every meeting, the observer had 5 minutes to share what they noticed about the team process. They noticed that Sybil turned her camera off, halfway in, and then we lost her because something was happening, or Yvonne was talking too much, and Cynthia kept having this point she wanted to share, and it really wasn't happening. So how do we create the space for everybody to participate? And then the nice thing about this observer role is if you rotate it, everybody starts getting good at it. So it's not just the leader's job to notice what's happening for the team, it's the full team's responsibility to do it.
What great tactical advice. I know I was taking some notes. I'm sure our participants were as well. I can't believe how fast this hour is going. It's 9:48. So I do want to take another question or two, and then I want to make sure that we leave our audience who's been here and engaged the entire time with some tidbits of advice as we go. So Michael and Stephanie, thank you both. It's a new Michael, but still Michael with the bangers. They're asking about books that you've read or are currently reading that have impacted your journey in prioritizing the culture of DEI. And then Stephanie says, in addition to this, any websites or blogs? So really, where are you getting your information? Where can our participants find out more, continue their journey? What would you recommend to everybody?
Yeah, so I fully believe in starting with an emotional intelligence book. There are several versions of them. Pick one up, read, learn about it. Um, There is another book called The Glass Closet, which talks about coming out. This very high-powered CEO had to come out forcibly to his company, and it talks about how to shift that conversation. White Fragility is another one that I like. Um, oh gosh, there's so many. Find it, find a topic, and don't overwhelm yourself, right? Like, so all of us have been doing this for a long time. I've had the opportunity to build my bookshelf accordingly. Figure out what your global thing you want to learn about, and then start learning about it. And then the second thing that I will say is, yes, I love resources as well. Um, but make sure you're also able to identify the resources that your company needs, right? Like, the worst thing we can do as diversity practitioners is address a problem that does not exist, because now you're flagging something that, right? We're creating something from nothing. So figure out what the tone of your community is up front, and then build backwards from there. But I mean, so many resources. And the other thing that I like to do at my company is whatever that focus month is, that known month is. Right now we're in Black History Month, right? So fine tune your information about Black history. It's American history. During Pride, we ran everything about Pride. We had all of the resources available. So I would say take it in small chunks, and then build out from there based off of what your curiosity is. But those are a couple of my faves.
And taking that a step further, Sybil, you're right. There's so many books and resources and blogs, and it can be super overwhelming. So find something. But when you do, engage in conversation with someone else. Maybe do a little mini book club. You can do book clubs with your teams. But even just finding one person who, who wants to read a book along with you and talk about it, you'll find that you both have completely different, ideas on certain things. You'll learn more from hearing other folks' perspectives and what they got from the book or from that chapter. That's really helpful too.
That's a really powerful point, Cynthia. I really, I'm a total geek. If I showed you my library, it would fill up this back wall. And I also am really passionate about audiobooks because I find that I can get a lot of stuff in and some things that I've gotten through really quickly because of audiobooks. Cast by Isabel Wilkerson, which really gets into that whole power dynamic and things like that. It's really powerful. Love the 1619 Project. It helps with that history, to your point, Sybil, that none of us have gotten. There's a more recent one that's come out by the Kende, which is about 400 years. So it kind of recounts and talks about how, our history, the African-American history is the American history, which is really powerful. And there's a book that's about to come out called Intrinsic Inclusion, and it's about rebooting the brain. Because that's where I'm really passionate about. And somebody asked questions about how do we get, leaders and things like that on board. When people start to understand their neurological preferences and how they're showing up just because of how their brain is wired, in addition to the stories they've been told, it helps to start breaking that stuff down. And there are some real deliberate things that we can do to retrain our brain. So for example, the power of the pause, which is one of the ideas that, if you find yourself reaching conclusions, to sort of step back for a minute and say, how did I get there? What made me do that? What made me think that? Who did that person remind me of? So, anything that gets you to think about your brain and its contribution to what's happening in this world, and anything that allows you to understand our history and how we got here as a country and in the world, and anything, but back to Sybil's point, that gets us looking at ourselves and who we are and how we show up in this world and interact with others. But go for audiobooks if you can't stand to read.
Lots of ways to get information. And I love what you all shared. And I loved, I'm hearing common themes coming through. I'm hearing intentionality, right? Being intentional with the information you're taking in and sharing with your teams, but also being intentional with making those connections. You have to do that, especially in this remote environment. I'm hearing taking ownership for your career and for, the conversations that you're having. I'm hearing being accountable and having an accountability partner, having someone that you can talk to, and probably someone that isn't exactly like you would be helpful, wouldn't it? To have that accountability partner. Maybe someone, Yvonne, like you talked about your reverse mentorship, someone that's had a very different experience from you. I'm like, I don't want to leave you all. I love this conversation, but I do want to be mindful of the time. So I want to give you the last few minutes here. What are the parting thoughts? What do you want our audience to take with them from this conversation as they move into the next right thing? What's the next best step to be taking here?
I'll start because I saw a lot of comments that we didn't really address about equity and fairness. From a compensation standpoint, but equitably just all over. And I think that that speaks to, we talked about earlier, measuring things, really find an organization that will help you to measure your pipeline, who's applying to your jobs, who's making it through the process, who once they're onboarded, who's getting promotions, who's leaving the organization, why are they leaving, when are they leaving, what's the tenure, looking at that. And once you can determine sort of what the employee experience is like from a measurement perspective, and understand how the experience is different for different people potentially, that's where you can start to build in equitable programs to help leaders see, where the bias is creeping in. So I think measurement, and then, then we can really help and consult you and help you to build, initiatives and programs and all those things, ERGs, but you really need to know where the problems are, so you can make sure you're fixing the right thing.
Check your assumptions, right? I mean, I just love that. And that echoes what Sybil was saying about, don't pretend you know what people are having trouble with. Actually ask. Wow, what a novel concept. I love it. Yvonne, Sybil, who would like to share their parting thoughts?
I just want, let me just build on Cynthia's point, because I think especially where she ended, because if you're not clear about the problem you're even trying to solve, and as I'm looking at, people are in different places, absolutely. So it's going to be difficult for us to get specific for them. But I think to Cynthia's point, really know what's happening in your organization, what you need to do and why. So it's not a best practice unless it works for you, right? So you can read every book, you can collect every idea, you could try to do half the stuff that Sybil is doing, but if you got to figure out and understand what really is your problem, and someone asked this earlier, connect it to your strategy. So this isn't about a DEI strategy. This is about a delivering value strategy. And then look at, why are you not getting that? What is happening in your organization? Ask your folks, to Cynthia's point, ask them what's happening. Why are we not there? Why do we have these circumstances? The best answers are actually in your organization, in your room. So I'm just loving this conversation. Wish we had more. Meg, are you planning to, maybe summarize the, if some, we send back questions, answers to questions, what's the best mechanism to get all these great questions answered?
Yeah, I'll save it all. The video will be posted on YouTube, so if you guys want to watch it over and over again, I know I will.
I
Yes.
think I just want one thing, and I loved everything both of the ladies said. And right, I take it back to ownership, right? Like owning one's part in what's going to happen next. We cannot control the actions of our staff, our leaders, etc., but we can control what we're going to do moving forward. And one of the things that I love is this concept of, are we willing to learn, unlearn, and relearn what we thought was correct? And once we show up with that mindset, everything I might have learned about diversity up until this point might have been wrong, but I am going to be prepared to unlearn and relearn if I have to. And I lead with that mindset. And I think about the evolution, right? Like it was called diversity. Now it's called, right? Like even how we're describing it is now changing. So the forward thinking HR practitioner is already saying, okay, but what's it going to be called next? And how can I point towards that? That's going to be my North Star for success. And then the other thing, because I see a lot of questions coming through, is my company, and I'm sure everyone else's as well, suffers from survey fatigue. Don't send out that 30 question survey. Give them a poll, one question. Here's that top thing I want to talk about today, quick responses, and take that feedback and do it bite-sized. Again, don't overwhelm your system. Don't overwhelm yourself with things that may or may not work, and you will see the traction. And it's going to be incremental. And sometimes the pains of growth are going to be difficult, but if I look back where my company was a year and a half ago where I started, we're definitely not that same company, and we are all the better for it. So keep that focus of, this is today's battle and tomorrow's will be different, and whether I win or lose, I've had a lesson from that experience.
Oh my gosh. I mean, just so many good ideas here today, thought-provoking, expert advice and guidance. And I cannot thank each of you enough for taking the time to share with us today. The chat's blowing up. Everyone loved it. So thank you all for taking the time for joining us for this really important conversation that we had. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to post this up on YouTube so you can watch it over and over again. I'll save the chat and the Q&A, and we'll try to get to those questions. But Cynthia, Yvonne, Sybil, gosh, I mean, thank you so much for being here and for sharing your expertise and guidance. And we wish you all a great rest of your day, and take that first next step and start improving these conversations within your organization. Thank you. Take care.